and Sarah, thanks for having me. I have to say, getting an email that said, hey, I read this article you wrote, do you want to come to Belgium in October, was pretty awesome. So I'm going to talk about something that is one of my favorite subjects, which is myself, and sort of how I've made it as a freelancer in the US, and hopefully try to give some lessons for you guys as well. So I'm going to start with some stuff about me. And that's a picture of me. I live in Brooklyn, and I'm 30. I graduated from school in 2005. Sorry, some of the second years I've heard all this already, so I apologize to you guys. And in college, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I figured I wanted to do something with writing, but didn't know whether I wanted to be a journalist or some of the other professions. So I was a rhetoric major, which is kind of a pretty small discipline, but I liked it because it was really broad and I could do whatever I wanted. And then my senior year, so my fourth year of 4 as an undergraduate, I was the news editor of my college paper, and I started writing for the Lewiston Sun Journal, which is a local paper in Lewiston, Maine, which is the town where my college was. And that was pretty much all the experience I had until I moved to New York after graduating. And I wanted to be a writer, so I got a job at a restaurant, like everyone else, and I am really good at clearing tables. I'm a really good busboy, so that's another skill that you'll get as a journalist, I would imagine. And while I was doing that, I just wrote for wherever I could, and for free and not for free. I had a couple of internships. I interned at Paper Magazine, which is a fashion magazine, which I think I'm okay as a dresser, but I certainly did not exactly fit in there, but it was good experience, and it met a lot of good people, and had a lot of fun and went to some good parties. I also had an internship as a sports editor at Time Out New York, and through that got a column from them. It's a small weekly paper in New York. So then I took a job at a journalism site called MediaBistro.com. That's a resource for journalists, and you guys should all check it out. It's mostly focused on US, but there's some international stuff, and there's a lot of good tips about being a writer and being a freelancer. And so through that editing process, learned a lot there. And then I was there for 18 months, but I always wanted to be a freelancer, so I eventually quit that job and became a freelancer. And that's what I've been doing pretty much ever since. I've spent the last 8 years, like I said, in New York, except for a year when I went to San Francisco, which is also a great city. So that's a little bit about me. And then I tried to pick pictures that would make you all laugh. So one of the keys to my success, which is sort of in a little bit opposition of what Catherine said, but I think we're started talking about similar things, is saying yes. Like I said, I did a lot of writing. I've written about a lot of different things in the past 8 years, and some of them I liked, some of them I didn't. Increasingly, I get to write about things that I like more and more. But for me, at least, it's been important when an editor comes and says, hey, do you want to write about this, to really think about it. And I very, very often say yes, even if I don't want to do it. I think the really important thing is to know that you can do a good job. And I think what Katrina was saying a little bit was, say no if you know you're going to do a bad job. But for me, at least, not wanting to do something because I'd rather hang out with my friends or go to a bar or something like that, it was not the best solution when I was young. And so I kept writing, and I think that's really important, to at least say yes the first time, and then if that editor or whoever comes to you the next time and says, hey, well, you did a good job on that, do you want to do this again, then you can say no. But at least in the beginning, it's really, really important to say yes and to get a broad range, when you're in school or when you're first starting out, especially if you're like myself, and I didn't really know what I wanted to write about. And so I've fallen into sports, but I also do media, and I also do tech, and I do some culture stuff. And I think as a freelancer, there's 2 ways to do it. You can specialize, which is smart if you're super interested in one thing. I'm not really, though, so I have to do a really broad range of things, and so it's important for me to have clips in all kinds of different areas. The nice thing about saying yes is that at some point you get to say no too. And the other day someone emailed me and they wanted me to write something. It was a CEO of a company, and he said, can you do some blog posts for me and my voice? And I said, no, you know what? No, I'm going to Belgium and I don't have time to do that. And that was a really good feeling because I didn't want to do it, and I had the freedom to say no, even though I had so I had the freedom to say no because I had been saying yes for so long. So now we're going to talk about money. Do you guys know who Scrooge McDuck is? Does this picture? Does anybody know this picture? That's an American thing. Okay, may have lost the audience. Anyway, it's this really rich duck, and he's a cartoon, and that's kind of a long story. But that's gold behind him. So that's why this is about money. So, like I said, writing for free. You're going to have to do it, and everyone is going to have to do it in this world. You're not going to get out of school and get paid hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars to be writing. And so it's important to think about why you're writing for free and when it's worth doing it. I've always thought that writing for free, for me, there's been two reasons to do it. One, if I was really interested in what I was doing and I had a blog or had some other articles that I wanted to do, but wasn't going to get paid, it was a great way when I was first starting to write about soccer to show people that I knew about soccer and that I could talk to people and write about it and write intelligent thoughts. And it's also a great way to ingratiate yourself with editors who in the future can pay you. So I think that the good news right now is that more and more online publications are starting to pay. They may not pay a lot, but they pay a little bit, and we're starting to see more and more that are paying significant amounts of money, and that's totally different than it was even 5 years ago, where the stuff that I was writing I was not paid for. Another strategy that I've had when it comes to money is to figure out some things that happen every month so you can know when to pay your rent. And you guys don't have to worry about health insurance as much, but in the States we have to worry about health insurance. And it's just nice to know where that base of your money is coming from, and so to get sort of reoccurring monthly things. I have 3 or 4 things that I do a couple times a week or once a month that pay a lot of the money. And then if you have that, then you can go out and you can pitch longer features or bigger projects that may or may not work. The other final thing is there's a lot of, we talked a little bit about this earlier, but there's a lot of projects like ghostwriting or writing for corporations or writing sort of advertorial content that pays really well. And there's sort of this attitude with journalists that you shouldn't do that or that you're too good for it. And I'll tell you, having talked to a lot of freelancers over the past 8 years, there are very, very few freelancers who make this work on a financial level that's sustainable without taking some of those jobs. So don't be afraid of, if a corporation comes and says, hey, can you write this for us? Don't be afraid to do it, especially if your name is not on it. All right, so we've talked a lot about finding a niche today, and this is one of my favorite pictures. I took this picture of Jermaine Jones, who was a midfielder for the U.S. team and for Schalke. And this was right after the U.S. qualified for the World Cup, and he has 3 American flags and 2 Budweisers in his hands. And I was interviewing him because I was at the game, because I write a lot about soccer. And I've sort of stumbled into writing about soccer. I played in high school, and then I went to the World Cup in Germany in 2006. And a website that a friend of a friend worked for was looking for people to write about their experiences. And so I did that when I was over there, and I did a good job, and I did a good enough job that when I got back, they said, would you like to keep doing this? And so I did it, and I've covered the U.S. team now since then, so almost 10 years. I went to the 2010 World Cup. I was in Costa Rica when they lost a couple weeks ago. I've been to Honduras. I've been all over the world writing about soccer. I was in Russia last year, and it's been great, and it's been a lot of fun, and it's really important to become an expert at something. Like I said, I don't do it all the time. I probably spend about 50% of my time writing about soccer, and so it's not all the time, and I wouldn't want a full-time job writing about soccer, but I really like it, and I'm, of this probably maybe 30 people in the U.S. who write about the U.S. team on a relatively regular basis, and I'm one of those, and that's kind of cool. It's kind of cool to be in that group and to know all of the people and to know the team. And so, whether it's soccer or writing about your cat or writing about anything, find something that interests you and start a blog about it and start showing people that you're an expert, and then they'll come to you to write about it, or you'll go to them and say, hey, look, here's my blog, and here are some stories I've done. And you kind of build up your contacts that way as well. There's also a little bit of entrepreneurialism in there. I started a site called American Soccer Now with a guy who writes for the New York Times, and we cover the U.S. team. And so I spend, a couple hours a day working on that, and it's a site entirely dedicated to the U.S. national team, and we're growing, and it's doing well, and it's still not going to pay the bills or any of the bills at all at this point, but it's the kind of thing where I own it, I own part of it, and I feel it's different when you have something that you're building from the ground up rather than jumping onto another publication. So that's another way where if you have something that you care about and that you do a lot of times. Cool. All right, next page. You guys still okay, everyone? All right. So this is another thing that's really helped me, and I've been really fortunate to have been able to travel here and all over. And all of the places in blue are places that I've gone in the past 8 years, I think. And I show you this not to prove how much I travel or to be obnoxious, but just because I've written stories from every one of those places, except for Argentina, where I left my computer in a coffee shop and I couldn't write a story. But other than that, I've written at least a piece from everywhere, and that has two advantages. One, you can write off the travel for your taxes, which is a huge advantage. And the other one is, you find these amazing stories when you're out there. Some of these places I've been sent, a lot of the soccer ones, I mentioned Costa Rica and Honduras and Russia and South Africa, I was sent by someone. And other places I've just gone with friends. I went to Colombia and all over Germany and India that I've gone with friends just for vacation and found stories. And even in Belgium, last night the Belgian team played, and so I went to a local pub and watched a game with a bunch of fans, and it was fun, and I'm writing a story about that now. And so it's really important to find those opportunities. I would imagine the bike trip, you met some amazing people on that trip, and some stories popped up out of that you wouldn't have found if you just stayed and read the internet, or even just looked around here. Sure, there's great stories here too, but it's great to kind of get out of your comfort zone. We've talked a lot about that today as well, and I think that really applies to travel. The other thing is, take notes wherever you go, because you never know when you're writing a story, and someplace you've been or somewhere you've gone, you're gonna wish that you had those notes, or you're gonna remember something and wish you had better notes. This is sort of along the same lines, but this is all about the hardest thing about being a freelancer is finding stories, at least for me. And the way to do that is to, like I said, to travel, but just to sort of constantly be thinking about stories and story ideas, and also be thinking about where you can place them. This is a magazine called Open Skies. It's the in-flight magazine of Emirates Airlines, and I wrote the cover story. This is the September issue of this year. I wrote the cover story. It's about this guy, Forrest Fenn, who is from New Mexico, which is in the southwest of the US, and he buried $3 million in gold in a treasure chest in the middle of the forest, or in the middle of the desert, and wrote a book about it. And in this book there's a poem, and the poem is a guide to how you can get there, how you can find the treasure. And so there are all these people in the middle of New Mexico searching for this treasure now. And so I have a friend who lives in Santa Fe, which is where it was based, and he was telling me about this, and I was like, that would be a great story for this Open Skies magazine. And the only reason I write for Open Skies is because when I went to India, I was on an Emirates flight, and I was reading the magazine and really liked it. And so I emailed the editor when I got back, and I said, hey, do you need writers? And that was, I don't know, a year and a half ago, and I've been writing for them. And so it's just, just sort of constantly have this part of your brain that says, this might be a cool story, and take a note. Another example, when I was flying over here yesterday, there was an article in the Brussels Airlines in-flight magazine about the first female brewery in Kenya, and so I ripped it out because I think that would be a great story to pursue somewhere. It's already in this magazine, but maybe there's a trend piece about female-started breweries in Africa. So I apologize to anyone who's missing page 53 of the magazine, but you have to get. And so, the other thing that I think is cool about this picture is that my friend who told me about the story is a photographer, and he took it. So it was like a team effort. And we also talk. He has a lot of photography. He runs across stories all the time when he's taking photos, and he tells me about them. And so we've collaborated on a bunch of different projects too. So that's another way to have your friends who are either in the industry or not, or doing interesting things, just kind of constantly telling you about things they've run across that might be interesting stories. So this is the story that Sarah mentioned, which I wrote a story for the site called The All, which is one of my favorite sites, about my life as a freelance journalist. And it was just as exciting as this talk, I promise. And it was about money and about how you make money, and I liked it. But what was interesting to me was how popular it was and how many people read it, which was very cool. And you know, it was one of the first stories that I've written that has sort of gone viral beyond the intended audience. The intended audience for this was sort of journalists who read this site, but it really went a lot wider. And I don't know how many people read it, but I got probably 400 new Twitter followers in that day that the piece was up, and probably 30 emails from younger journalists asking for advice, and a bunch of different magazine editors emailed me and said, hey, I love this piece that I saw, and will you write for me? And that's sort of how these things happen if you just keep writing, and you slowly get your name out there. It's not a fast process, but it does happen, and this is an example, and I think me standing here is an example of the fact that if you keep going, keep pushing, and keep writing, and keep doing good stuff, people will find you. Another way to build your brand is to just email editors and say, hey, I'd like to write for you, or hey, can I buy you a drink? I like living in New York because I do that all the time, and worst case is you meet someone and talk to them and get a drink out of it, and best case is they give you an assignment or you end up on staff at a magazine. So I think that's been one of my biggest successes, is just that I've never been afraid to email someone and just find an email address and drop them a note, and not be obnoxious, and don't push it. If they don't respond to you, don't take offense to it, but just try it and see what you can do, and you'd be really surprised where it goes. Getting to the end here. So another thing, use what you have, and this is more about you guys thinking of sort of your careers, I think, but you have a pretty unique situation here in Belgium, that I think from what I understand, the immediate media industry in Belgium is relatively small, but you're so close to all of Europe, and all of you speak like 17 languages, which is awesome, and I barely speak English, and so I think there's a lot of ways where you can take advantage of the fact that you're here and that you have all of these skills that I don't even think you really even think of skills, because everyone around you has them. But in the US, people don't speak 3 or 4 different languages, and people don't know much about Belgium or the Netherlands or France or Italy or any of these places. And so I could see where some of you guys are, you could be sort of the Belgium expert for the New York Times or for all of these different places, and you could that would be another angle, is to pitch yourself as that expert. Or the Belgium soccer team is a great example. I think a lot of people are going to be really interested in them coming to the World Cup because they're doing so well, and people don't know that much about them, but you guys all know a ton about them. And so there's a lot of American publications or publications from around the world that are going to need to know about that team, and they're going to need experts about that team. So if any of you are, have specialties or are interested in that, there's definitely an opportunity. I think that's sort of just one way that you can kind of think locally and globally. Kind of think what are your advantages from living here, and how can you take advantage of that in the broader media world, because it's a global society. I'm sure you talk about this in your classes all the time, but it's not just the publications here in Belgium, but it's publications all over the world, and editors always need smart, good writers who know what they're talking about, and very individual talents. And people love having the dateline too. If you say, Belgium, that'd be great. So this is, when everything else fails, go running. And this is what I do. I know I talk a lot about running, but it's one of those things. I think freelancing is really hard, but it's hard in a different way than most jobs are hard. Most jobs are difficult because you're frustrated with your coworkers, or you don't want to go to work at 9 and you don't want to leave at 7. And freelancing has entirely different stresses, but it also has, huge benefits. And for me personally, being able to go running in the middle of the day is great, and that's one of my favorite things about freelancing. And I think for someone else, it could be something else, but it's just that opportunity to clear your head and to you're on your own, and I think that's a huge advantage. You have to be really self-motivated, and I don't think freelancing is for everybody, but it really works for me. I have the mindset for it, and I think if it works for you too, it's a great job. You certainly have to, you have to know that going in, and but it really is great, and I love it. And that's not a great way to end it, but I'm just gonna stop there. So thanks for taking the time, and if you have any questions, just hit me up.
Before the questions, would you be able to talk about that article that I read and
Sure.
why you think it went viral? And I mean, it was really interesting how you broke down how freelancers get paid.
Yeah, sure. So I wrote the article because I was really tired of reading all of these articles that were about the economics of the media industry and about freelancing and about writing, but none of them had any specific amounts of money. So I wrote probably, it's 3,500 words. It's a pretty long piece, and I talked to a lot of writers and reporters about their jobs and their lives and how the industry had changed. But one of the pieces that I think really struck everyone, which I knew, or I thought was going to, was that I took probably 10 or 15 different publications, and I just told everyone very specifically how much they had paid me for what, and also how much I had made on the year. And that ranged from $0 for some things to $2,200, I think. So it was like 1,500 euros or 1,600 euros. And I didn't get paid a huge amount for any one piece, but it added up to a pretty good amount of money. And I think what really struck people was just, or at least what they had told me, was that just that honesty of someone going out and saying, here's what I made, and here's how I did it, and it's possible, it's hard, but you can do it, was great. And I was a little worried that some editors or publishers were going to be upset with me for revealing how much money I had made. And I think somewhere I heard from a couple who were sort of, wish you hadn't done that, but it's okay. But it paid off much more in terms of editors who said, that was really ballsy, that was awesome, I'd love to have you write for me. So I think that was one of the things that I really took away from it, was just that people really, really appreciated the honesty of it, and sort of the brutal honesty of this life, and how you can do it, and that it is possible, but it's really hard.